All right, so I'm back, ready for the second video for integers operations. Uh, the last video focused on what integers were, as well as adding integers. And so we discussed kind of some ways to think about integers to try and make sense of them, and what happens when you add. And so just real quick, to remind you, the main idea of the last video is that I want you to see addition whenever you add things as combining. Okay, adding means to combine. So when you combine two positive numbers, you're going to get a larger amount of positive numbers. When you combine two sets of negative numbers, you're going to get a larger set of negative numbers. Okay, so you add those numbers and it would remain negative. So, and then finally, when you add different signs, they take each other out, they cancel each other out, and really, whichever one has the most when you combine them is what's left. And you just have to figure out how many is left. So those are some ways to think about integers addition, and it can usually be made sense of. So what we're going to talk about in this video is not quite as easy to explain or easy to even think about. So today, or in this video, we're going to talk about subtraction. Okay, integer subtraction. So let's go back to my camera here and talk about what subtraction is. Okay, so if I asked you, what does subtraction mean? What does it mean to subtract one number from another? The usual answer is to take away. Okay, and if I asked you to give me an example of a subtraction problem, like a story problem, you'd probably say something along the lines of, I had 5 apples and I took 3 away. How many's left? I had 5 apples. I took 3 away. How many was left? Okay, so 5, take 3 away, leaves 2. We can think about the chips like we did in the last video. These, technically, the way it's written, are both both positive numbers, positive 5 and positive 3, but you're subtracting 3 from 5. Okay, you're taking 3 from 5. So the picture might look something more like this. Five positives, you're subtracting 3. Okay, taking away. So you take 3 away and notice what's left. 2. That makes sense. That's a typical subtraction problem. But the issues start arising when you do the other types of subtraction problems. So even if I were just to take these two numbers and flip them around and did it 3 minus 5, now drawing the picture is a little bit harder. So these are both positive numbers, positive 3 and positive 5, and I'm taking 5 from 3. So I have 3, because when it comes to subtraction, you really start with that first number. That's where the action begins. So I have 3, and I need to take away 5. So if you take a look at that picture and think about that, how am I going to take 5 away when there's only 3? Okay, now I could show you how that works with the chips, but I think it's a little bit confusing and I don't think it's helpful. So I'm not going to show you. So there are a couple ways to think about subtraction that might be better than using the chips. Okay, and one of them would be the number line. All right, so if we go back to this first problem, 5 minus 3. And look at it more as a number line again. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. So using a number line, again, you always start with this first number. That's where the action begins. So in this problem on the number line, we would start at the 5. Okay, so we're starting at the 5. And then we got to think about in which direction are we going to head. So minus 3, when you're subtracting a positive number, your line's going to go to the left on the number line. Okay, so we start at 5 and we go back. Think about this as back 3. Okay, 1, 2, 3. There's 3 spots. Notice where we end up, 2. We already knew that from the first one, and we could see that with the chips as well. But I want you to see how that works on the number line. We start at the first number, 5, and we go back 3. It's a set of 2. So now let's see how that works with this second problem. We got 3 minus 5. We started with the chips, 3, take 5 away. That doesn't work. All right, so let's draw a number line. Now, to the left of the 0 is negatives. Okay, so -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. So again, when it comes to subtraction, really, or addition, you can think of it that way too. Start with this first number. So we begin at the +3, okay, which is right here. +3, I'm going to put a point. And now we look and see which way we're going. We're going back -5, back 5. So if I start at the 3 and go back 5, okay, notice where I end up. I end up at -2. Okay, so even though we're looking at similar problems in 5 minus 3 and 3 minus 5, they are different, okay? And the only difference is the order in which they happen. When it comes to addition, the order does not matter because what you're doing is you're just putting those things together. So it makes no difference which number's first or second. But when it's subtraction and you think about taking away, or here's another way to think about the difference, think about the difference, then the order matters. Okay, you have to look at which numbers first. So that's very important when we start working with negatives and subtraction, especially. Okay, so sorry, hit that. So take a look at this because I want to just point out some different ways that you can see this. Okay, so 5 minus 3 is 2, and 3 minus 5 is -2. And so really the only difference in our answer is the sign, +2 or -2. And when it comes to subtraction, you can kind of use the operation in front of the second number to see the value of that number, okay? So take a look, 5 and -3. If I put 5 and -3 together, that would be 2, okay? They're different signs, so they cancel each other out. There's 2 more positives than negatives. But when we look at it this way, +3, -5. If we put those two together, +3 and -5, that would result in a -2 because there's 2 more negatives than positives. And so you can kind of see subtraction as addition, okay, if you look at it a certain way. All right, and it's pretty easy to see in this particular problem. Let's take a look at what happens if I change the order, or not the order, the sign of the first number. Okay, so how about -3 minus 5? -3 minus 5 is probably going to be hard to do with the chips. 3 negatives is what you would start with. And you're trying to take 5 positives away. That doesn't really make sense with the chips, okay? So I'm not going to worry about the chips. Really, I think it's easiest not to think about the chips at all when you think about subtraction. Works really well for addition, okay, and combining, but subtraction's a little bit harder to understand with the chips. So let's go to the number line, okay? So the number line, we have -3 minus 5. So we're going to be starting at -3. So I'm going to put 0 there. Okay, not the best number line, but so -3 is where we start. Find -3 is here. Okay, and where do I go from there? I drop 5. I go back 5. Back 5 puts me here at -8. Okay, so while these two problems look similar, 3 minus 5 or -3 minus 5, they come up with quite different answers. Okay, and so that's why I think it's really important to kind of visualize what's happening in this problem. Okay, so in your mind, I want you to see the first number. That's where we start. We start at -3, and what happens from there? Okay, from there we drop 5. So we go further into debt. If we're talking about our bank account, we're at -3 and we drop 5 more. We go further into the negatives. Okay. The other way I said is kind of see these two numbers. This is a -3 and a -5. -3 and a -5 make -8. Okay, and you put them together. So, are you confused yet? If so, you know, it's understandable. This is actually the hardest part of positives and negatives, is subtraction. Okay, but I'm trying to give you multiple ways to look at it, think about it, so that maybe one way will be helpful for you and you can get through it. Okay. All right. So, in this one, we changed the sign of the first number from here. Okay. So now let's change the sign of the second number. This is the one that really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Okay. So we're going to do 3 minus -5. 3 minus -5. What I want you to do real quick, I mean, if you already know how to do this, then fine, go ahead and do it. But if you are really learning this, go ahead and pause your screen. Okay? Pause your screen. Do whatever you want to do to try and figure out what this is on your own. Okay? Don't use a calculator or look it up. And think about what you think this answer would be. 3 minus -5. Okay? And then come back. Okay, so 3 minus -5 is the problem. And I'm going to tell you the answer to this is a +8. Okay. The chips really don't work on this type of problem. We could think about the number line. Okay. So let's look at the number line. We're going to be starting at 3, so I need to make sure 3 is on there. Okay. There's a number line. Now, I didn't say this earlier, but you're not going to have time to sit down and write out a number line to do these problems. Okay. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying you need to do that. I'm trying to give you an understanding of the concept, a way to think about it. But eventually, you're just going to be able to look at these and do them, just like you can do an addition problem in your head right now. If I said, what's 5 plus 3? I'm sure you could tell me it's 8. And it's not because you're getting out a number line and writing it down. It's because you know it. That's how you will get with this if you continue, moving forward and keep going. But for now, learning it, you need something concrete, something visual to try and make sense of it, okay? So 3 minus -5, I told you the answer is 8, but we're trying to figure out why. Chips aren't going to work. We're looking at the number line, okay? Start at the 3. Here's the 3. Okay, so I'm starting there. Now, on the number line in the last one, we started at the -3 and we dropped 5. We went back 5. That took us there. This, however, is not the same. This is back -5. Not back 5, back -5. And so, it makes this really confusing. What it actually does is flips the direction. Instead of back, it's like back, okay? 2 negatives, 2 minus signs next to each other, okay? And the way that we're going to deal with this is we are going to see this as minus negative means plus positive. And it does every time. It's taking away a negative, which is in essence is adding, okay? So that problem went from 3 minus -5 to 3 plus +5. And 3 plus 5, if I would have put that problem in there, you would have got it correct because you know how to add that, okay? And so you start at 3. Minus means you would go this way, but negative flips it and sends it forward, okay? And puts you at 8. So minus negative is the same as plus positive. These are the same. All right. And so anytime you see a subtraction sign followed by a negative number, at least until you just get used to seeing it, you can move over the top of them and make them both positives, both plus signs. Okay. So let's look at one last example. I think the only thing I didn't do is -3 minus -5. All right, so why don't you go ahead and pause the screen, give that problem a try, and then come back and see what the answer is. Okay, we'll see if you followed my advice. But -3 minus -5 is actually going to equal +2. Okay. Chips don't work so well on this type of subtraction problem. And so probably one of the best ways is to do the number line. You always start at the first number, -3. Okay. Minus would make us go left, but so does negative. So minus negative really means plus positive. So I'm going to start at a -3, and I'm going to increase 5. And I've started at -3, increase 5, which puts us at a +2. Okay, those take some practice. Subtraction in general takes a lot of work. You can visualize the number line for a lot of it, and then just always keep in mind anytime you have minus negative, you're going to change it to plus positive. Okay, so I'm going to give you 4 problems. Let's go ahead and look at 4 subtraction problems. Okay, so here we are. Hopefully you can see this. When I went back and watched the last video, I realized when I came to this screen, it didn't show it, but I think it's showing it now. So try these 4 problems. And just in case it's not showing, we're doing number 11, which is 2 minus negative 2. Number 12 is negative 1 minus 10. Number 13 is 8 minus 7. And number 14 is negative 8 minus negative 6. Okay. So go ahead and give those 4 a try. Pause your screen if you would, and then come back and watch me go through. Okay. All right. So hopefully you did okay. We're about to check. All right. So we have positive 2 minus negative 2. We're going right off the bat. We're going with the minus negative. And hopefully you followed my advice and saw that the 2 minus signs next to each other really can just turn into plus signs. And 2 plus 2 is no doubt 4. Okay, so if you got 4, good job. Number 12, negative 1 minus 10. All right, so I really want you to think about, we start right here on the number line. So we start at negative 1, and then we minus 10 from there. So think about where you're going. You're dropping 10. You're already at negative 1 and you drop 10. It's going to put you at a negative 11. Okay, it's negative 1 degrees outside and it drops 10 more. That would put you at negative 11 degrees. If your bank account's at negative 1 and it drops 10, now it's a negative 11. 13, 8 minus 7. I don't think there's any explanation needed. That's a 1. And finally, number 14, negative 8 minus negative 6. Hopefully you saw 2 minus signs next to each other and you changed them to plus. Okay, now we're going back to what we learned in our last video. Negative 8 plus positive 6. So this is a plus problem. This is an addition problem. We're combining 8 negatives with 6 positives. Okay, we're combining different signs, which makes them cancel each other out. Who wins, the negatives or the positives? The negatives win because there's more of them. There's 2 more negatives than positives. So that's what's left standing, 2 negatives. Okay, so there's those 4 answers. You know, feel free to ask questions, work through the worksheets. The good news and bad news about integers is the good news is you're going to get a lot of practice. Okay, it's not like you got to learn this now and you can't move forward unless you do, because it's in everything we do after this. So the bad news is you're going to make mistakes. All right, you're going to make mistakes, but the good news is you're going to get lots of practice. So what I've tried to give you is some ways to think about how to do these. Subtraction number line is really probably the best way. You start at the first number and then you move up or down. You know, that's the only options you have. You either got to go up or down. So you look at what follows that first number and it tells you where to go. Okay? And if you can visualize that, you can do this. The only really exception is the minus negative problems. Minus negative, you're going to change into plus positive. Okay? Eventually, you'll do that in your mind. You won't actually write it down. You'll just know that's what it is, and then you'll do the addition. All right? So let me know questions you have, and if you're one of my students, I can give you plenty of practice on this. So good luck, and hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know if you have any questions. All right? Take care. See you next time.